Noah Turner never imagined that his financial desperation would lead him to a wedding altar. A struggling university student drowning in debt, he was barely keeping up with tuition and rent. Then came Margaret Whitmore, a 71-year-old millionaire widow with a proposition that seemed unreal: marriage, in exchange for stability and wealth. At first, it sounded like a bizarre but harmless arrangement. No love, no strings, just comfort for both. Or so he thought. The media called him a gold digger. His classmates whispered behind his back. But Noah didn't care. He convinced himself he was doing what he had to survive. The mansion, the servants, the luxury, none of it eased the unease that settled in his stomach each night. Margaret was kind, almost too kind. And in her mansion's silent halls, Noah began to feel watched, studied, like he was part of a story far older and darker than he expected. On the 7th day of their marriage, Noah stumbled upon a room he hadn't seen before, locked behind a heavy wooden door in the west wing. Inside, dusty journals, faded photographs, and files bearing his father's name. That moment shattered every illusion. Margaret didn't marry him out of loneliness. She married him out of vengeance. His father, once a ruthless businessman, had ruined Margaret's family decades ago. This marriage wasn't a coincidence. It was a trap. Noah's mind spun. Was he just a pawn in a bitter game of revenge? The realization gnawed at him, unearthing a storm of betrayal and fear. What started as a marriage of convenience quickly spiraled into a psychological nightmare. With each discovery, Noah was forced to confront a terrifying choice: protect his family's dark past, or expose a woman who had the power to destroy him. One decision would define the rest of his life. When you think about love, revenge is probably the last thing that comes to mind. But what if one could disguise itself as the other? What if a simple "I do" was really a carefully orchestrated trap, designed to settle a score decades in the making? This is not a fairy tale. It's a story about ambition, pain, redemption, and the deep scars we inherit, whether we know it or not. Noah Turner thought he had secured his future by marrying a wealthy, aging widow. What he didn't know was that his name, his bloodline, was tied to a past Margaret Whitmore had never forgotten. And she didn't forgive easily. In a world obsessed with appearances, Noah's story reminds us that behind every opulent curtain may lie secrets too dark to ignore. One innocent-looking decision can ignite a chain of revelations that changes everything. This is more than just a story of a man and a woman. It's about the weight of family legacies, the price of hidden truths, and the unexpected courage it takes to break the cycle. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. It really helps us bring you more emotional stories that touch the heart and stay with you long after they end. Are you ready to uncover the truth that shattered a life of luxury and rebuilt a man's soul? Then buckle in. Because what started as a marriage of convenience will become a battle for justice, forgiveness, and freedom. Noah Turner had always been a fighter, not in the ring or on the streets, but in the quiet, desperate kind of way that only those born into poverty understand. Raised by a single mother who worked double shifts and still went to bed worried, Noah's life had been shaped by scarcity. College was his one ticket out. But that ticket came with a price: a mountain of student debt, part-time jobs that barely paid for books, and nights where he went to bed hungry, his dreams shrinking alongside his bank account. It was during one of those long nights at the campus cafe that he met Margaret Whitmore. She sat alone at a corner table, elegant in a vintage coat, sipping tea with the composure of someone who had never rushed for anything in her life. There was something magnetic about her presence, like she didn't belong in that space, but chose to be there. She watched him from behind rimmed glasses, eyes full of quiet calculation. When she finally spoke, it wasn't small talk. It was an offer. "Tell me, Mr. Turner," she said, with a voice both warm and sharp. "How much is your freedom worth to you?" At first, he laughed it off, but Margaret wasn't joking. She knew everything about him: his debts, his scholarship status, even the name of the dorm he lived in. Noah felt a chill run through him. No one should have that kind of access. But she did, and she used it to deliver a proposition that felt like fiction. Marry her, keep her company, live a comfortable life, and in return, she'd pay off all his debts and leave him enough money to never worry again. It sounded insane, but to a man drowning in bills and hopelessness, it was salvation. He spent the next few days thinking of every possible scenario. What would people say? What would his mother think? But then he thought about never having to work 3 jobs again, about finally breathing. So he said yes. The wedding was private, classy, and oddly cold. No friends, no real family, just an officiant, a few witnesses Margaret paid for, and the silent agreement hanging between them. When she slipped the ring on his finger, Noah felt a shift, not of love, but of ownership. Still, he smiled for the photos, signed the papers, and toasted to a new chapter. He had sold a piece of his freedom, but for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of the future. Their new life began in her mansion on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of home he had only seen in magazines. Glass chandeliers, velvet curtains, polished floors that echoed when he walked. At first he was in awe, but as the days passed, awe turned into unease. The house was too quiet, the staff too stiff. And Margaret was kind but distant. She rarely smiled, and when she did, it felt rehearsed. One night, Noah wandered into her study, a room she had told him was off limits. He didn't intend to snoop, just to understand the woman he had married. But what he found were photographs, dozens of them, all of the same man, middle-aged, smiling, always with Margaret at his side, her late husband. Beneath the photos, he found newspaper clippings, articles about a business empire ruined, headlines that mentioned a name he recognized, his father's. A cold wave passed through him. He hadn't spoken to his father in years, not since the scandals, the lawsuits, the shame. But there it was, in black and white. His father had destroyed a company. Margaret's husband had been the owner. Suddenly, everything began to twist. Was their marriage really about companionship, or was he a pawn in something bigger? That night, Margaret found him in the study. She didn't yell. She didn't even look surprised. Instead, she poured herself a drink, sat across from him, and said, "Now you know." Her eyes glistened with something dark, rage maybe, or pain. "Your father took everything from me, and now I have you." Noah didn't sleep that night. The mattress felt like stone. The walls seemed to whisper. He had walked into this marriage thinking he was the one using her. But now he realized he had been chosen, and not out of love. He had stepped into a story far older than he could have imagined, one that began long before he was born, and one that had just begun to pull him under. The following morning, the mansion felt colder, not in temperature, but in spirit. Noah moved through its marble halls like a guest overstaying his welcome. Every door he passed felt like it hid a secret. Every painting seemed to watch him. Margaret wasn't around, and the staff avoided eye contact. It was as if they too knew something he didn't. Or worse, something they weren't allowed to say. He tried to busy himself, reading in the library, walking the gardens, sipping coffee in silence. But the questions gnawed at him. Why him? Why now? Had Margaret planned this from the beginning? Was he just a living reminder of her pain, a poetic revenge against a man long gone but whose legacy still echoed? That night, Noah couldn't sleep again. Restless, he wandered the house. He ended up in the attic, an expansive dust-covered space filled with old furniture, boxes, and forgotten heirlooms. In the corner, beneath a sheet, he found a trunk. Inside were journals, Margaret's journals. He hesitated. It felt like crossing a line, but curiosity overruled conscience. The entries started decades ago, when she first met her late husband, Henry. The tone was romantic, hopeful, but as the years passed, the entries darkened. Henry's business was struggling. A man named Victor Turner, Noah's father, had appeared, promising partnerships and salvation. Instead, He had gutted the company and vanished. One journal entry shook him. He took everything, and no one cared. But I will make sure his legacy carries my pain. I will not be forgotten, and neither will he. The ink was smudged, the words etched with fury. Noah sat back, breathless. He wasn't just part of a twisted love story. He was the final act in a long, calculated plan. Over the next few days, Margaret's behavior changed. She was suddenly attentive. She cooked breakfast, asked about his day, smiled more often. But it wasn't comforting. It was chilling. It felt like a performance, as if she had already won and was now savoring the aftermath. Noah felt trapped. He couldn't confront her. Not yet. He had no proof of anything criminal. Just pain, just motives. He needed something tangible, so he started digging. Quietly, discreetly. He reached out to his childhood friend, Lucas, a journalism major now working for a small investigative paper. If anyone could help uncover the truth, it was him. Lucas listened carefully as Noah explained the situation over a secure call. At first, he was skeptical. "Are you sure this isn't just grief and coincidence?" But when Noah mentioned the journals and the business connections, Lucas agreed to look into Margaret's past. "If there's something there," he said, "I'll find it." Days turned into a week. Noah maintained the charade, playing the dutiful husband while his mind spiraled. Margaret remained calm, composed, too composed. He noticed she had a private room in the West Wing, always locked. He'd seen the staff go in, but never heard what was inside. One night, curiosity burned too hot. He followed one of the maids, watching from a distance as she unlocked the door. Before it closed, he caught a glimpse. Walls covered in photos, newspaper clippings, and red strings connecting faces, like a detective board in a crime drama. Margaret wasn't just remembering the past. She was obsessing over it, preserving it, plotting it. Noah backed away silently, heart pounding. The door clicked shut behind the maid, and the hallway fell silent again. He now knew with certainty he wasn't safe, not truly. And the only way to survive was to uncover everything, before Margaret decided his part in her twisted play was over. A week passed, heavy with tension. Every interaction between Noah and Margaret felt layered, smiles laced with suspicion, gestures hiding meaning. Noah found himself second-guessing everything. The mansion, once awe-inspiring, now felt like a gilded cage. Even the sunlight seemed filtered through secrets. Late one night, as Noah stared at the ceiling, his phone buzzed. A message from Lucas. "Meet me. Urgent. I found something." Noah's heart raced. He slipped out before dawn, telling the driver he needed fresh air and choosing a walkable coffee shop downtown. Lucas was already there, laptop open, eyes serious. "I dug into Margaret's past," Lucas said, sliding the screen toward him. Her late husband's company didn't just go under, it was deliberately sabotaged. Several shell companies funneled money out. And your dad's name, Victor Turner, was attached to at least two of them. Noah's stomach turned. He'd known his father was ruthless, but this was surgical, calculated. "But there's more," Lucas added. "Margaret didn't just suffer a financial loss. Her younger brother worked for the company and took his life shortly after everything collapsed. She blamed your father, and by extension, anyone carrying his name." The realization landed like a punch. This wasn't just revenge. It was grief, trauma, and rage tangled into obsession. "She married me to make my family suffer through me," Noah whispered, staring at the screen. Lucas nodded grimly. "That's the only thing that makes sense. And there's something else," Lucas said, lowering his voice. "She's been quietly buying stock in several of your father's old ventures, through fake names. I think she's planning to destroy what's left of his legacy." Noah felt dizzy. This woman didn't just want closure. She wanted complete annihilation. "You need to get out," Lucas urged, "or go to the police." But Noah shook his head. "We don't have hard proof. If I confront her, she'll deny everything. And if she finds out I know..." He trailed off. The risk was too high. He had to be careful. Back at the mansion, Margaret greeted him with warmth. She had prepared dinner, lit candles, even played soft music. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "Everything all right?" Noah forced a smile, masking the storm inside. "Just adjusting. It's a big change." She nodded, pouring him wine. Change can be hard, but sometimes it's necessary. That night, Noah sneaked back into the West Wing. He picked the lock to the mysterious room with shaking hands. Inside, the walls were even more chilling than he remembered. Photos of his father, articles about his business collapse, a timeline of events, and in the center, a picture of Noah, crossed in red ink. Beneath it, the final piece. Noah took photos of everything. He knew now. This was no longer just about a strange marriage or a broken past. It was about survival. Margaret had orchestrated a masterful, emotional revenge, and he was the final chapter in her decades-long vendetta. But he wasn't going to be a pawn anymore. He would gather evidence, build a case, and end this, not just for himself, but to break the cycle that had claimed too many lives already. The next morning, Noah woke up with purpose. The fear was still there, coiled tight in his chest, but now it was fused with determination. He couldn't walk away, not yet. Margaret had built a fortress of deception, but now he had a chisel. One truth at a time, he would break it down. He started by making himself useful around the mansion, fixing leaky faucets, handling small repairs, suggesting updates to the estate's management. The staff began to trust him, and more importantly, let their guard down. He learned names, habits, who Margaret trusted, and who resented her behind closed doors. One of the housekeepers, Maria, a kind older woman who had worked there for over 15 years, began speaking to him in hushed tones. "Be careful," she whispered one day. "This house, it has memories, not all of them good." And when Noah gently pushed for more, she only said, "Some truths hide in plain sight." Encouraged, Noah began searching Margaret's study. He waited until her weekly spa appointments, 3 hours alone in the mansion. In a locked drawer, he found a series of ledgers and journals. Some were coded, others in plain text. One entry made his blood run cold. "The Turner boy trusts me. Soon the pain will be poetic." That same day, Lucas contacted him. "You need to see this," he said, sending over encrypted documents, bank transfers, property deeds. A trust in Noah's name, created by Margaret just days after the wedding, but designed to implode after 1 year, dragging several Turner assets down with it. "She's using you as a Trojan horse," Lucas warned. Noah sat in the grand dining room, staring at the documents, heart pounding. He had a choice: walk away now, quietly, with no evidence strong enough to expose her, or risk everything to dismantle the scheme. But Margaret's words echoed in his mind. Change can be hard, but sometimes it's necessary. This time he agreed. He began recording everything: conversations, phone calls, screenshots of her emails when she left her laptop unattended. Every breadcrumb, every whisper. The closer he got, the more dangerous it felt. Margaret started noticing his distance. "You're distracted, love," she said one night over wine. "Is there something I should be worried about?" "Just a lot on my mind," Noah replied, keeping his voice level. "It's a lot, this life change." She smiled, but her eyes were sharp. "Well, don't get lost in the past. We only move forward here." He nodded, the irony stinging. He was moving forward, just not in the direction she imagined. Days later, Maria handed him a small, worn envelope. "I think you should have this," she whispered, slipping it into his coat pocket before vanishing. Inside were photographs, Margaret younger, smiling beside a man Noah recognized from old Turner business newsletters, her fiancé, the one who had taken his life, and a letter. "Margaret, don't let hatred consume you." Noah sat in his room, staring at the letter, heart heavy. Margaret hadn't started as a monster. She had loved, lost, and unraveled. But that didn't excuse what she was doing now. She had crossed lines, weaponized grief, and nearly destroyed him in the process. He now had the evidence, the motive, and maybe, just maybe, the strength to take her down, not out of vengeance, but to stop the cycle she never could. The following morning, Noah stood at the edge of the estate's cliffside garden, phone pressed to his ear. "It's time," he told Lucas. His voice was calm, but his hands trembled. "We move tonight." On the other end, Lucas hesitated. "Are you sure? Once this begins, there's no going back." Noah exhaled. "I'm already too far in to go back." The plan was simple on the surface. Lucas would deliver the evidence, financial records, the trust documents, and voice recordings to a trusted investigative journalist with ties to the state attorney's office. Noah's job was to keep Margaret distracted long enough for the information to go public, but simple didn't mean safe. That evening, Noah invited Margaret to dinner under the garden lights. She wore a crimson silk gown and a diamond necklace that shimmered with every movement. "You've been distant lately," she said over the first course. "I was starting to think I'd lost your attention." Noah smiled gently. "Never. Just adjusting to the weight of being a husband to someone like you." Her expression softened, and for a moment, Noah saw the woman from their wedding day. The charm, the poise, the brilliance. But now he knew the mask. She lifted her glass. "To new beginnings." He raised his as well, forcing the toast. "To truth," he said, locking eyes with her. The moment hung heavy between them. At the same time, Lucas delivered the dossier to the journalist. Within minutes, photos, files, and Margaret's coded journals were being scanned, copied, and verified. By morning, the story would break, exposing decades of fraud, coercion, and the manipulations behind Margaret's wealth. It would be the end of her empire. But the night was far from over. As Noah cleared the plates, Margaret approached, voice low. "You know, I always admired your father," she said, "until he ruined my life." Her tone was soft, almost wistful. "I waited so many years to make someone from his blood feel what I felt." Noah froze. "Why tell me this now?" Margaret stepped closer, her fingers brushing his sleeve. "Because I saw something I didn't expect. You reminded me what it was like to feel again, to be seen." Her voice cracked. "And I hate that." Noah's heart pounded. This wasn't confession. It was control. One final attempt to reel him back in before she lost him completely. "You don't have to go down with this," she whispered. "We can vanish. Start over. I'll sign everything to you. I just don't want to lose the only thing real I've had in decades." Noah stepped back. "The only real thing here is what I'm about to do." His voice was steady now. "This ends tonight." At that moment, sirens echoed in the distance. Margaret turned sharply. "What did you do?" she hissed, her mask breaking, eyes wide with betrayal. "What you made me do," Noah replied. "I told the truth." The gates burst open. Police lights flooded the driveway. Margaret stepped back, trembling, not with fear, but rage. As officers escorted her away, she never looked back. Noah stood at the edge of the garden once more, breathing in the night air. It was over. The storm had broken, and as his phone buzzed with messages from reporters and lawyers, he turned it off. For the first time in his life, he had chosen his own path, and that path was leading somewhere he had never been before. Freedom. The media storm hit like a hurricane. Overnight, Noah became the man who brought down a billionaire. Headlines spun every version of the story. Student husband exposes dark empire. Love and revenge collide in high society scandal. He married her for money, then took her down. Noah ignored them all. He wasn't a hero. He had just refused to stay silent. The days that followed were heavy. He testified in front of a grand jury, walked through courtroom halls under watchful eyes, and sat in endless legal meetings. But through it all, he remained composed. Lucas stayed by his side, his anchor in the chaos. "You did the right thing," he reminded him, "even when it cost you everything." Margaret was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Her assets were frozen, her properties seized. The foundation she once boasted about was dissolved, and in the process, a portion of her estate, millions of dollars, was left unclaimed. As her legal husband, Noah was entitled to a share. but accepting the money felt like blood money. For weeks he debated. The inheritance could buy comfort, luxury, even anonymity. But it didn't sit right with him. One evening, he stood on the rooftop of his old dorm building, overlooking the city lights. He remembered what it felt like to have nothing. And strangely, it didn't feel far from how he felt now. Wealth hadn't made him feel whole. Truth had. That night, Noah made a decision. He accepted only a portion of the estate, just enough to live modestly. The rest he poured into something bigger. He partnered with Lucas to create a scholarship fund in the name of Robert Whitmore, Margaret's late husband, the man she had once loved before everything turned cold, the man who had never been part of her darkness. The fund supported students from disadvantaged backgrounds, kids like him, lost in debt, with dreams bigger than their wallets. For every student who walked into college with hope, Noah felt a piece of his burden lift. "If I can't change what happened," he said at the foundation's launch, "maybe I can change what happens next for someone else." As months passed, Noah moved into a small apartment by the river. It had creaky floors, old windows, and a leaky pipe in the bathroom. But it was his. He taught part-time at a local community college, telling his story not as a cautionary tale, but as proof that even the most twisted chapters could end in healing. Sometimes he still dreamed of Margaret. Not the villain, just the woman, lost and lonely beneath layers of vengeance. He didn't hate her anymore. He couldn't. Hate had consumed her. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant letting go of the weight she tried to pass on to him, and Noah had chosen to live without it. On the one-year anniversary of her arrest, Noah returned to the garden where it all ended. The estate was abandoned now, windows boarded, weeds reclaiming the path. But in that place of ruin, he planted a single sapling, a small tree, fragile but rooted. He didn't need a monument. He needed a reminder that something new could grow from what had been scorched. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, Noah sat beside the tree, a quiet smile on his face. He had walked through fire and come out scarred but standing. His story wasn't the one he imagined, but it was his. And in its brokenness, it had become beautiful. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Noah once believed that wealth would fix everything, that it could drown out the noise of pain, erase the shadows of his past. But in chasing comfort, he had stumbled into something far deeper, the raw, uncomfortable path toward truth. And it was there, not in luxury or lies, that he found himself. The boy who once counted every coin had uncovered a wealth no bank could hold. Honesty, purpose, and peace. The story people told about him changed with time. Some still whispered about scandal, others called him brave. But for Noah, none of that mattered. What mattered were the students who found their way because of him, the lives he helped shape, the healing he chose over hatred. In the silence of his new life, he discovered that the loudest victories were often the quietest ones. As the seasons turned and the years rolled on, Noah never stopped planting new beginnings. In every classroom he taught, in every letter he received from a grateful student, he saw the ripple of one decision, the choice to tell the truth. Not for glory, not for revenge, but for the simple, sacred right to be free. And in that freedom, he had finally come home.